Hi guys, this is Act 5. So we're right near the end and it's about to go down. So if you remember, Romeo isn't seen at all in Act 4 and it kind of really focuses on Juliet. Now of course we're at the bottom of the narrative arc in terms of the tragedy structure, and this is where it all kind of culminates and ends very badly, basically. And I've spoken about this a lot, but the original title, The Most Lamentable Tragedy of Romeo and Juliet, I think they called it Excellent. But just as in, this is a brilliant thing, but it's also the most lamentable, it's most kind of tragic story. So we open on Romeo, and he is speaking about he had a dream, and how he had a dream about some really joyful news. So obviously we got some dramatic irony there in terms of the foreshadowing of the dark news. And obviously we know it's not actually joyful news at its hand. He says that his bosom's lord sits lightly in his throne, so his heart is really light, he's really happy, everything is great right now. Yeah, everything is great, and he couldn't be happier. In this bit we get several examples of kind of this positive emotive happiness semantic field. He goes into a bit more detail about the dream, and he says that he dreamt my lady came and found me dead, and he says that she breathed such life with kisses in my lips that I revived and was an emperor. So one interpretation, I think, is that he would feel like he's on top of the world almost. He would feel like a ruler of the world if he was revived by the love of his life, and he kind of he would feel incredible, as if he was an emperor. So using it as a metaphor. But also, I think another interpretation and another interesting way of looking at it is that he is almost seen as an emperor through his fate kind of fixing the war. Because remember, it's their love that breaks the ancient grudge that was spoken about in the prologue at the very, very start. So maybe as if he will be seen as an emperor, as this great person who stopped the conflicts that have been going on for centuries between these two families. So two interpretations there, but also, the idea of the kind of romantic relationship as well, with the kisses and the physical connection, and that she kind of gives him life, and that without her, he doesn't want life. And we've seen kind of him talk about that kind of stuff all the way through the play since he met her, basically. Balthazar is Romeo's kind of assistant, and he comes in, and we see a bunch of questions from Romeo. So he asks, "How now, Balthazar? Are you bringing me news from the friar? How is my lady, as in my wife? How is my father? How is Juliet?" So he asks 5 questions, and 3 of the 5 are about Juliet. So he says, "Are you bringing me letters from the friar?" As in, are you telling me how things are back home in terms of Juliet? Because that's what the friar said he would do. He says, "How is my lady, my wife?" And he says, "How is Juliet?" So his priorities are very, very fixed. He's very kind of focused on the idea that she is the person he wants to be thinking about and getting news about. And obviously we're seeing kind of the return of impulsivity there, and kind of the eagerness that he has in finding out the news. So Balthazar breaks the news because he's misheard, because obviously he wasn't in on the plan from the friar, and the friar and the friar and Juliet are the only ones who know about the plan. So Balthazar has heard about the Capulet daughter dying, supposedly, because obviously, they're a huge family, and the news of the death would be travelling all around Verona. So he'll have heard it from a secondary source, and would believe it. So he's gone to tell Romeo, "Listen, she's died." And we see Romeo kind of returning to this idea of fate. He says, "Is it even so?" And then he says, "Then I deny you, stars. Thou knowest my lodging. So I refuse to do what you say, stars. I don't agree with you as a power in my life." Okay? Obviously, stars in terms of context will be important for belief and for choices, and for the idea of kind of you didn't have free will, that everything was predetermined for you. And he says, "Thou knowest my lodging," as in you know where I live. You know where I am. You've got the power, and you're using it against me. So to see this kind of pattern of foreshadowing, we see that It's mentioned in the prologue. We talked about the death-marked love that the prologue talks about in Act 1. There's also the quote that Capulet says in Act 1, Scene 2 about the earth-treading stars, as in these things that are earth-treading. You know, they're kind of, they've almost been personified in terms of fate, and obviously we could now look at that as Romeo and Juliet, perhaps. Also in Act 1, Scene 4, when Romeo talks about, you know, he feels like there's some consequence yet hanging in the stars. There's been a pattern all the way through, yeah? And one of the key ones that people thought about was when he says his fortune's full in Act 3, Scene 1. And I think him saying, I deny you, stars, and also that I'm fortune's full, he's acknowledging he doesn't like fate and he doesn't appreciate it and he wishes against it, but he also kind of acknowledges that he can't do anything about it. Yeah? And if you remember as well, in the balcony scene, in Act 2, Scene 2, he compares Juliet to the stars. And he says that, you know, her eyes are two of the fairest stars. He would, you know, shame the stars that would dare kind of, you know, stop her being so bright, or whatever the exact quote was. So all the way through, there's this kind of pattern of fate being shown. But the fortune's full and the I deny you stars, I think, are the two really key ones that we're seeing. Now, when he says, I'm fortune's full, that's when all this goes to pot, basically. So that's the point where he's just killed Tybalt and he realises this is awful. This is all kind of starting from that point as well. So there's kind of an intrinsic link between the two ideas. He's kind of constantly fighting it. He's constantly fighting fate. And he's going to lose because we know star-crossed lovers take their life. You know, we know he doesn't win. And yet he's so passionate in his fighting. He's so passionate in his refusal to do what fate or the gods kind of would have him do. Obviously, we come to a key theme as well that we've spoken a few times about, but is really kind of evident now, of the individual versus society. So societal expectations and societal norms, they go against them every single time. They marry for love, not for wealth. They refuse to do what the elders are saying. They're refusing to listen to authority in terms of the prince. They are fighting in the streets. They are murdering. They're doing everything that kind of society expects them not to do because their priorities are each other and they just want to be in love with each other. The idea that people aren't just predetermined and that you actually have free will, kind of the idea that we have nowadays, that you can make your own choices in life and you can kind of control your own destiny, wasn't really a school of thought at that point. You know, these ideas have been floated around for, you know, thousands of years. You know, the ancient Greeks spoke about it a lot, and it wasn't really something that was accepted as probably true for a long time after Shakespeare died. So is he being, you know, really kind of genius and foreshadowing, you know, knowledge? Probably not. But I think his plays are kind of, it's kind of spouting all the kind of frustration and vexing that you'd feel at feeling that you had no choice and that you had no kind of, you had no power in your own life, almost in your own destiny. And that's kind of, I think, what's happening here as well. That zooming out, it's not just about Romeo and Juliet. Obviously, we've talked about this, you know, the kind of holistic idea of the play is love overcomes hate. Romeo and Juliet are irrelevant. It's about love overcoming hate. It's kind of a bigger idea than the individuals in the play. So Balthazar replies by saying that your looks are pale and wild and do import some misadventure. So again, foreshadowing there, absolutely. But also, it's kind of a quiddity of Romeo there, his unique characteristic, that he acts as if he's got nothing to lose, as if he's already dead, that he's pale. You're acting as if you've got nothing to lose, you may as well already be dead, so you're just going with whatever you want because you can't be harmed any more than you're already harmed. Which is probably how he feels about the exile and not being with Juliet. And also the idea of wild, that he's not tamed and he's not propering his kind of choices and mannerisms and characteristics and actions impulsive. Balthazar is seeing it in his eyes. He's seeing something about Romeo, and we're seeing that from the language used, that Romeo does not look okay. He looks like he's completely distraught. And bear in mind, you know, probably a minute or 2 minutes ago, he was really, really happy, saying his heart was light and he just had a dream about Juliet and his, you know, her kiss would revive him from death because it's so powerful and so amazing and that he'd feel like an emperor. So real kind of perspective change for Romeo there. He's really kind of hit rock bottom. So he asks, have you given me anything from the friar? Now, we're seeing something similar that we saw from Juliet as well, that she was questioning whether the friar was actually on her side. She said, what if the friar was administered a poison because he feels like he's screwed up, basically. And Romeo's doing the same thing. Have you got, what? So there were no letters from the friar? You're the one telling me this and not him? Romeo perhaps feels betrayed here, that he's not, the one other person apart from his wife that he trusts isn't helping him out here, isn't kind of fixing the problem, again, as we're seeing Romeo wanting again and again and again from Friar. So Balthazar goes out, and we see a soliloquy from Romeo, and he says, I will lie with thee tonight. So his mind is made up. He's going to do it. He's going to end his life. And we also see that he kind of references this innate feeling that humans have, that mischief is quick to enter the thoughts of desperate men. If you are desperate, humans will do a lot to kind of survive. Yeah, if they are desperate to do something, they will just impulsively do something. And he kind of references his own fatal flaw there, in terms of kind of mischief and doing kind of things that are against the grain and against society. Again, individual versus society coming back. That it quickly enters the thoughts of desperate men. That desperate men are kind of the weakest form, almost. That desperation is worse than anything because you will do anything to not be desperate, if that makes sense. And we've seen him do this a lot in the play. If you remember in the very first scene, he talks about shutting out the light and he wants to be on his own in a dark room because Rosaline didn't love him. And we've seen this a lot from Romeo, where he wants to resort to kind of this safe place, or this safe kind of solution, this simple solution. So in the first scene, when he's been rejected by Rosaline, or kind of whatever history we don't actually find out about, he says he wants to shut himself up in kind of a dark place and not see anyone and not be with anyone. And in Act 3, Scene 3, he draws a dagger when he's with the friar, and the friar's like, whoa, no, calm down, we'll think of something. He's kind of foreshadowed his own language use here, really. Or Shakespeare's foreshadowed it for him. Clever guy. This whole part, I'm not going to kind of analyse the individual language too much, because you can do that on your own. But the desperate thoughts we learn now are about an apothecary. So an apothecary was someone who dealt with potions and medicines and all that kind of stuff in the time. And he kind of goes on a whole description about a shop that he saw that was kind of very dilapidated, and the guy looked really meager and weak and pale and skinny, and he describes all this kind of stuff that was in there, basically painting an image in our mind that this apothecary is not kind of well off. This person is not the person you probably want to go to. It's probably one of the more run down places in Mantua, which, remember, that's where Romeo is right now. Even though it's shut, it does say, look, the beggar shop is shut. So he shouts in, and the person comes out going, whoa, who's this? Why are you shouting so much? And he says, come hither, I see that thou art poor. So Romeo gets straight to the chase. He doesn't say, hello, my name is Romeo, and I'm in a real big predicament. I need to blah, 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 blah. He doesn't do that. He just goes, right, you, come here. You're poor, aren't you? And he offers money. Okay, so he says, hold, here is 40 ducats. A ducat was like a golden coin around the time. A ducat was around 10 shillings. So 40 ducats is about £20 in Elizabethan money. He's offering a huge amount of money. If you translate it into kind of modern, kind of with inflation, a ducat is around £105. And therefore 40 ducats, I've already done the maths, don't worry, is £4,200. A huge amount of money. Now, the cost of living was also lower then. So an example, kind of, again, to put it in context of how much money, one, that he's just got with him, and also two, that he's willing to just throw away because he thinks he's going to end his life, and he does. £20 that's worth in that time. And Shakespeare, when he bought a property called New Place, I'll find an image and put it on there. That was £120 when he bought it. So £20 in this time was kind of several years worth of wages for the average person. The average person stood in the Globe watching Romeo and Juliet in the late 1500s would probably make, about a ducat per month. Yeah, that'll be their wage, kind of obviously broken into 4, etc. They'd be paid weekly, probably about 10 shillings for every month. Okay, so he's offered 40 months worth of average wage in one go. If you remember as well, we spoke about before with the musicians and the servants that there is this idea that the relatable ones are kind of the peasants, the people who aren't from a rich family, who aren't, whose only worry is not about someone that they love. They've actually got kind of everyday worries for the time. And I think the apothecary kind of, again, is a symbol of that, and the shop is a symbol of that. That people were not well off. The vast majority of people were not well off. People lived in the streets, people were scraping to get by, really worked on the breadline. Or lived on the breadline, whatever the phrase is. And Romeo is manipulating that. He's kind of abusing the power that he's got through his wealth, through the random fact that he was born into a rich family. Yeah? Well, we see it as a random fact. To be fair, in this time, they'd probably see it as you were chosen to be in that family to end the war, perhaps. But, the audience would have empathized with the apothecary. They would have understood. They know what it's like to be starving. They know what it's like to have no money. If someone comes in and says, here's nearly 4 years worth of wages for you in one go, I need you to do one thing for me, you're going to be listening, because that is a huge amount of money. And I'm not spending a lot of time on this, but I need to understand how much money that was, and that how kind of, again, how given up Romeo feels, and how kind of resigned to the fact that there's no point anymore. He says, let me have a dram of poison, okay? And he says he wants him to hurry the fatal cannon's womb. So the apothecary says, I have those, I have something that would do that, but, the law is death to anyone that sells them or speaks about them. I have something like that, but I couldn't do that because I will be killed if they find out. Or when they find out, he'd probably feel. Romeo goes on an interesting kind of idea here. And again, it's kind of linked to the idea of fate that we talked about, the theme there. And he says, are you so bare and full of wretchedness and fear to die? Famine's in your cheeks. You've got need and oppression in your eyes. Your beggary and your contempt hangs on your back. I can literally see, almost kind of metaphorically, all over you that life has not treated you well. And that life is being awful to you. The world is not thy friend, nor the world's law. The law is not on your side. Similar with Romeo. The law is not on his side because he's not allowed to, kind of socially, he's not allowed to marry the other family, or marry Juliet, or marry who he wants. So Romeo's kind of, he's reeling off his own emotions and his own reaction to the situation that's going on by going at the apothecary. And he kind of attacks him and says, what is wrong with you? Nothing's on your side. So why are you kind of pandering to these ideas that are kind of screwing you over? Take the money. What are you doing? Yeah. He's pretty harsh, but he makes a good point that, the apothecary is defending a system that is screwing him over. So the apothecary gives in. He says, my poverty, but not my will, consents. As in, you've kind of strong-armed me into this, but I need the money. This would be life-changing for me. I'll take it. And Romeo says, I pay thy poverty, but not thy will. So I'm not paying for you to like what you're doing. I just want you to give me the poison. I'm paying, if poverty is a thing that helps me, fine, I'll stop your poverty. Now, the last part, he gives him the poison and he says, if you had the strength of 20 men, it would dispatch you straight, so you'd be gone. Doesn't matter how strong you are, put it in anything liquid, drink it, you'll be dead. And Romeo hands in the money and says, there is thy gold, worse poison to men's souls, doing more murder in this loathsome world than these poor compounds that thou mayest not sell. Then there's an interesting one at the end. I sell thee poison, thou hast sold me none. He feels like money is the issue, wealth is the issue, worldly possessions are the issue, because that is why people married. That is why people worked. That is why the Capulets put on such elaborate parties and weddings and all that kind of stuff. It was all about money. It was all about looking better and having more. And it was about kind of that aspect of life, not happiness. And Romeo, and obviously Shakespeare as an extension, is making a point about that, an interesting point, that actually the poison is the money. Because that's what's caused his joint suicide with Juliet, basically. Romeo doesn't know this yet, but he's about to kill himself with Juliet. And to be fair, he's probably right. Wealth is the issue, and wealth is the reason that it's all going to happen. It's almost kind of the idea of money doesn't buy happiness. Yeah? It might help, but, you know, Romeo, who is immensely rich, the Montagues, who are immensely rich, and the Capulets, who are immensely rich, still have misery in their life. And it's not kind of the be-all and end-all of everything. You still need happiness in other areas of your life as well, not just kind of financial happiness or comfort. So he says, farewell, buy food and get thyself in flesh. So go and buy some food. You are a skeleton of a man. Treat yourself. Off you go. And then he says, come cordial and not poison. Go with me to Juliet's grave, for there I must use thee. So he doesn't see this thing as a poison. He sees it as just like a tonic, a beautiful thing. He's so happy he's got it because it's going to set him free almost. It's going to kind of take him to be with Juliet. Because again, he believes that she is dead. And then he goes out, and that's the end of that one. The next scene is a really, really short one, so I'm going to blast through that one. And there'll be a really short video going up too. But yeah, really important scene, this one, I think. It's a really kind of insightful one for Romeo and his kind of mindset and the way that kind of Shakespeare comments on society as well. I think it's quite an interesting one for this one. But yeah, any other questions, do let me know. And in the meantime, stay safe. Bye-bye.